I felt like God said to me in my kitchen, Amy, I want to shepherd you through this, but you have to come to me and let me shepherd you. And it felt like he was saying, you need a spiritual diet change. The things you're feasting on, running to Google, feasting on your fears at night, and what's the future going to look like? These aren't nourishing your soul.
Welcome to the Sharing Passion and Purpose podcast, a weekly podcast providing career and creative inspiration to help you build a purpose-filled life. If you're interested in tapping into your creative potential, pursuing a career with passion, and building on your biggest and best resource, yourself, please join me on this path. I'm your host, Nancy Moore, and I want you to know that I'm on this journey with you. So let's get started. This week, I'm visiting with Amy Seiffert, mother of three. Her new book that we discuss is called Starved. You will see why she wrote the book. Hint, it's because of something that was going on with one of her kids, and how women do not have to be starved. They can be unstuck. They can be fed and nourished and happy. And I am going to let her talk a little bit more about that in this visit.
Hello.
Hello, Amy. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing great. I am so happy to see you today.
Thank you. I'm like running around like a crazy person, but we are here right now.
But we're here to talk about Starved, your new book, and I absolutely loved it. But before we get into it, the people who don't know about you, if you could just share just a little bit about yourself, so people can learn a little more about you.
Absolutely. Yes. So let's see. I'm an author, speaker. I get to be on the YouVersion app sometimes. I'm a wife of, we are going on 22 years this spring. And I know, and I have three kids. Next year, they will be one in middle school, one in high school, middle school, and elementary school. So we are just here, there, and everywhere. But was on staff with Crew, a campus organization, for 15 years before coming on staff with my church on the teaching team. And then the last 2 years, really feel called to travel and speak and write and go where God takes me.
Yeah, one of my goals is to get you to Tulsa, and I know I'm the
Oh,
one who
let's go.
I know. So we'll see what I can do. But anyway, just so you know, that's kind of on my radar.
I love it.
So one of the things, this book came out of, well, actually, why don't you tell me why you decided to write this book?
Yes. So this happened under my roof, this idea. My son, about 4 years ago, was losing a lot of weight, was sleeping a lot, had a lot of stomach pain, and we started to wonder what's going on. And over the course of 6 weeks, he lost about 15 pounds. And on an 11-year-old, that's a lot. So after tests and blood work and all the things, we got the diagnosis that my son has Crohn's disease. And it was crazy because he had been eating, but he was starving. The food that had served him well was not serving him anymore. And so we needed to make a complete diet change. And there was a moment where we took everything out of the pantries, refrigerators, and everything. And we're looking at every spice, every package to see, can he have this? Is there starch in here? All the things. And I was overwhelmed. I was anxious. I was tired. And I felt like God said to me in my kitchen, Amy, I want to shepherd you through this, but you have to come to me and let me shepherd you. And it felt like he was saying, you need a spiritual diet change. The things you're feasting on, running to Google, feasting on your fears at night, and what's the future going to look like? These aren't nourishing your soul. So from there, I started to notice it feels like our culture needs a spiritual diet change. What we are feasting on isn't feeding us. And what does it look like to simply start to put some new practices in place to find some nourishment.
Mhm. Okay. That and see, that was such a process as a mom, to have to go through that with your child. And it that's something also that affects the whole family.
Yes.
And so, your normal, you is not your normal anymore. And so if you could kind of talk about that shift in maybe your mindset and in, kind of overcoming that, because now your son is great and healthy, and a book has kind of been born of this experience. But if you could kind of talk about that shift in your mindset.
Yes. We had to make a hard call because the shift for his diet was pretty strict. And are we going to go for this? And is this going to be worth it? And really weighing that out. And what does that look like for our family? Absolutely. And so that shift was mirroring what was happening in my soul of I am looking to Google to see how I can put this disease into remission. And yes, that's great. Like we're going to do all the research. I'm all about the science and all things. However, Google wasn't shepherding my soul.
Mm,
I I needed to put my phone down and practice silence and let God speak to me about Him being in charge and in control and leading us through the valley. Um, so yes, it was a shift for our family with the pantry and the food and our lifestyle. And then it was a shift for me on how I was going to who was going to shepherd my soul.
mhm,
And
mhm.
just as I'm shepherding my son and my family and my husband, we're shepherding each other, like these sorts of things. What does it look like to swap out what was really normal, being on my phone or rehearsing
Mhm.
fearful things, and saying, "Hey, I think I need to replace some things." Yeah.
So you call maybe, I don't know if you reference that as spiritual junk food? Is that the
Yes.
junk? Okay. Because I can totally relate to that. I so many times pick up my phone and I start scrolling, or I'm trying to, respond to comments and that kind of thing when I should be focusing on other things. And so I would love for you to kind of talk about ways where we can experience that spiritual diet change, because your book says that move us from tired, anxious, and overwhelmed. Because who wants to feel that? To
Right.
that's heavy. That is so heavy, and it's a
Yes.
heavy burden to bear, and we don't have to, and that's
Yeah.
what's so exciting. But you're saying we can move then to fulfilled, whole, and free. So if you
Yes.
could just share a little bit about your thought process in writing the book that helps with that.
Yes. So every chapter has a corresponding spiritual practice to try to replace, which is really fun because I did not grow up with spiritual practices. And it almost feels like when I mean my husband and I mentioned we've been married for 22 years. If we try a new adventure or we try a new restaurant, it we experience something different together that we haven't before, and there's a freshness there. So in the same way, trying silence with God, because I'm a doer, some of the spiritual boxes I would check off pretty often are like, I'm gonna sit down and read my Bible. I'm gonna journal. I'm gonna like do these spiritual things, but maybe I didn't ever actually connect to God. And so, what would it look like for me to simply sit, maybe find a window, look out at nature, and be silent for 5 minutes with an open palm posture that says, God, I'm here to receive and listen. And maybe he doesn't say anything. I want to normalize that so often. There's no major epiphany, but I am feeling the mind body soul connection. Like everything in my body starts to relax because I'm just being and I'm sitting in silence. And I'm very aware. that when I am not doing anything, God is still in control. And that brings me a lot of peace in that moment. And I find myself a little freer, a little lighter, a little more whole, a little more shalom, not so divided here, there, everywhere, which I think is fascinating. The Greek word for anxiety in the Bible is merimneo, to be divided, to be torn apart, almost like you're torn up about something. And how often we're thinking a million different things, we're so divided, but to sit and to experience one place, one moment, to let God's arms wrap you and to experience some shalom in the middle of your day has been really transformative for me. So just journeying through some practices in a new way. So I talk about silence and Sabbath, um, taking walks with God outside as a form of prayer. So just a lot of different, like, could we try some new practices that could shift our perspective and we connect to God rather than to all the noise
Mm-hmm.
around us?
Mm-hmm. I love that your book has that has the practices, and then I'm trying to remember the other. Is it a little scripture or a prayer? Actually, it was
Uh-huh.
a practice and a prayer, and there's so much in it that is applicable. So it's almost, I don't know if you'd call it a workbook, but
Yeah.
it is, there's a way for you to kind of, or for people to read about your experiences. And then, it's rooted in scripture as well. And then has this practice and this prayer. And I think it is hugely helpful for people going through this kind of thing. And you mentioned anxiety, and that's one of the things in the book. You are so vulnerable and honest about a lot of different things, including, struggles with having kids, and the length of time it took you, and leaning on your community, and all of that. So if you could kind of talk about your openness and in sharing that vulnerability, because I really appreciated hearing these stories and could relate to several of them
Mhm.
very well.
Oh, thank you. That's always great to hear as an author because you're like, I am putting myself out there in the world and
You
it's
really did, Amy. You really did. Yeah.
and it feels exposing and really having to
Yes.
pray like, God, you are my shield and also you're my healer. And I've experienced this healing so I can share that this weakness now has become strength and beauty in you. So I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I talk about shame, some shame
Mm-hmm.
stories, and talk about sexual abuse in my past, and God writing a new nourishing narrative for me, which I just love that He continues to rewrite that story. Yes, anxiety. I've learned a lot about grounding myself physically, grounding myself in the Word, grounding my soul, and some of those just practices that I love. I mean, praise God for therapy and all the different forms of grace in the world that He has given us. And just really learning to connect my soul to my body when I find myself the anxiety rising and I'm almost offline in my mind, how to come back and ground myself and using scripture as well as my senses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yes, I share a lot of different things in hopes that the reader would feel seen and known and know that there's a few tools and ways that I can just find a little more freedom, a little more wholeness, travel a little more lighter in a heavy world that we're managing right now.
Mm-hmm. Right. Let me ask you about being a mom and motherhood, because you referenced that, of course, quite a bit. And your son, the book kind of comes from the story of your son and kind of what you've overcome with him. But if you could talk about being a mom, and also maybe how you talk to your kids about, um, well, I've heard you reference on Sundays, that's your Sabbath, and with kids growing up and sports and different things, if you could kind of, just talk about all of that. I'm giving you so much, but anyway, you can unpack it. We can unpack it, but
Yes.
that motherhood and then kind of trying to keep Sundays as a Sabbath.
Yes. Oh man. So I always say we are doing Sabbath purposefully, not perfectly. So it changes per season, per kid, absolutely. And that's Sabbath is a perfect intersection of motherhood as well as spirituality in our house. What's been helpful is to keep it very simple with the Sabbath. But I do love that there is a feeling of, by and large, Saturday night when it gets dark is a winding down time for us, especially in the winter. Sometimes we have people over and we have a cook and we feast and it kind of kicks that off of a rest day. But sometimes it's just us and our kids, and I feel like they're well aware that mom and dad have put their work away for an entire day, purposefully. Like I put the computer away and the broom is away. And I usually spend a lot of Saturday prepping for the Sabbath. So getting laundry done, grocery store. Yes, there's kids athletics everywhere. But I've been very clear when they ask for our schedules for all the different soccer, tennis, all things. I usually say we really try, like we would prefer no games on Sunday if you're scheduling. And sometimes those happen, but I always just try to say, hey, um, it would be great. If not, it turns into a family affair and we go watch a kid, and this is how we're Sabbathing and delighting. But it's been helpful for me. I kind of have three loose rules about the Sabbath for me, and my kids kind of follow these as well. One is we worship together, so we go to church together. My husband is the worship leader, and really, it's turning our worship from work to the King, because I think our culture worships work and productivity, and so worship, nap. I want a nap on Sunday. So
Okay,
usually after church, there was some kind of nap. And even when my babies were really little, they would nap after church. I would nap. Now they don't nap and they play outside or run around or whatever they're doing. It doesn't matter. Mom's on the couch napping and they know that. And then I try to get outside as a way of delighting in God's creation and world. Even in Ohio, sometimes it's 8 degrees in the winter. It doesn't matter to get outside and feel the bigness of God and his creation and the trees and the oaks, and just let myself be and try to notice and name his nature. So this has been a practice that we have been building for 15 years after I took a seminary class years ago. And just again, per season, when it's football season, Sundays, sometimes we're football snacks, watching a game, all on the couch, and that's how we're resting. So again, I don't want to wrap the Sabbath so tight the way the Pharisees did that they missed the gift of it.
mm,
Um, but to really follow the spirit in the yeah, it's an invitation. It's not a rule, it's not a law. At this point we're free from that, but it is an invitation, a gift that we can unpack right now. And I think that rhythm of a rest day is huge for our family every 7 days.
hmm I'm with you on that, and I love a nap on Sundays. It was hard when my kids were younger to um, have with athletics, to have that break. But I'm also with you. We would just, pack up and go, and that would be our activity that we would do
Hmm.
together. Just because, that's the way it worked.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you, because this book is for women, and I would also love you to kind of speak to people that have younger kids. If you kind of remember that season where you're so busy and it's just as soon as the kids wake up, sometimes at 4:30 in the morning, you're
Oh,
up and going. So if you could kind of share a little bit of encouragement of how this book would help those moms or moms in each season, maybe.
yes. Oh, motherhood is a passion of mine. I don't know if you know, my first book was on mothering littles. It's called Chin Up. And so I
Oh,
talk,
I
yeah,
don't,
yeah.
Amy. I
I
I need that book. Oh my gosh, I just have 2 books of yours. So okay, I need that one.
yes, the first one is Chin Up. That was self-published, and that's what got it into the hands of a publishing house. And then these other two came through Tyndale. So yeah,
Okay.
there's a journey there too. Um, Yes. So, oh my gosh, I struggled greatly when my children were little because it's so physically demanding. And now I'm seeing with high schoolers, it's mentally and emotionally demanding in a different way, you know. So there's, but yes, with the littles, um, man, I would say to the moms with young ones, couple of things. I love in Isaiah 40 when I think it's 40:11 when God says that He gently leads those who have nursing young. And it's such a tender call of like, God, you will lead me. And you know, I have these other little baby sheep underneath me. You're going to shepherd me as I go. I would just meditate on that. But I'd also say, be gracious and kind to yourself. If you have to lock yourself in the bathroom and there's still little hands going under the bathroom to get to mom, and you take 5 minutes by yourself in the bathroom to just be quiet, that is enough. And God's gonna meet you when you're exhausted, and He's gonna meet you. But I would encourage you to reach out to God as well. I don't think I did as much reaching out to Him to say, "God, help. God, I need you. God, shepherd me here." I wish I wish I would have thought those little two-word prayers were quote unquote enough. They absolutely are. God hears the cry, and to ask Him to meet you in the physical demands of mothering with young ones, because it is exhausting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You and I both know, and I can picture little fingers going, little hands going under the door. I mean, I
Yes.
absolutely can picture it. Okay, so do you have a favorite passage of scripture that you lean on or go to? And
Absolutely.
what is that? I'd love to know.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I've been in this one sentence, this one verse for about a year, and it is Luke 15:20. And this is why. um, because starved, I talk about needing some new nourishing narratives. So much of our shame narratives, anxious narratives, places where we don't know our identity, we need a new story. And Jesus told stories. He asked questions and he told stories. And I can't get over the story he specifically told about the prodigal son, but not even so much about that dynamic of the prodigal son, but the way he describes the father in Luke 15:20. There are 5 verbs that are ascribed to the father that I cannot get away from. And so I just hope that your listeners can hear these 5 verbs and really take the time to sit and think. I call them the Father's 5, and this is why. If you can name each one on a fingertip and put at your hand to chest and imagine God seeing you in this way. So in Luke 15:20, it says that the Father saw his son coming back. And so we are seen in whatever struggle and whatever fear, we are seen. And then the Father, he was filled with compassion. And that filling is like not like a little bit, it's like from his tip of his toes through his belly to the top of his head, filled with compassion. And then from that, because compassion is empathy plus action, he runs, he embraces, and he kisses his son. And so these are 5 verbs. Like I do this in the morning. I put my hand on my chest and I run through each verb using a finger. Like, God, you see me. You are filled with compassion for me. You are chasing, embracing, and kissing me. And to rewrite how the Father sees me is huge for a number of reasons in my story. And so, yeah, that's been a verse I can't get away from.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I love it. Okay. Okay. This I thought was very interesting. Your connection between our anxiety and the scarcity mindset.
Mm.
And then you talk about abundance. And so if you could talk about having that different mindset.
Yes. So Dallas Willard has a book, Life Without Lack, and it's all on Psalm 23. And so I was reading that on a plane. I had had a nice few days away, a little vacation. But as soon as I got on that plane heading home, all the anxiety and the to-do list and all the things were rising in my mind. I often think, am I going to have enough time to get everything done? Am I going to have enough energy? Will I have enough new ideas? Is there enough? And so that scarcity mindset really hits me, and then I get anxious. But Dallas talks about Psalm 23 being just a key to help us sit there and think. We see David say, "My cup overflows," and that we have a God who is not stingy. We have a God who is owns every resource possible. He doesn't sleep, he's not tired, he can give us energy, he's not exhausted. He has enough to overflow our cup in the moment. And what does it look like for us to trust God and say, God, you say my cup will overflow today. When I'm looking at this list, I don't know if I can do it. I'm looking at this meeting I'm about to walk into. I don't know if I'm enough. I'm looking at this relationship and it feels broken. I don't know if I can't, what can I do? And to really say, God, would you overfill my cup in a space where it doesn't look like I have enough. That has been so helpful for me to call upon an abundant God, not in a prosperity gospel way, but in a way that says he's of kings and he owns the cattle on a thousand hills. Like he has abundance for us. I can lean into that.
Okay. Yeah. That's so encouraging because the stuff that you just shared, it's interesting as a believer, we do have those thoughts. And then we do have to kind of step back and think, okay, God, you've got me. I know you've got me. You know,
Yes.
I'm okay, but I have heard you talk about being in prayer throughout the day and having little conversations or prayers, and I do the same thing. I feel like
Yeah.
I feel so comforted when I do that, and I just, you can talk to him at any time, and he wants you to talk to him.
Yes.
He
He
wants
loves it.
he loves it, and I don't want people to feel stuck, and that's one of the reasons why I have this podcast, because I want people to dive into their passion and their purpose in life. And you talked about writing this book because you don't want people to feel stuck. And so if
Yes.
there's any extra thing you could kind of talk about with the book and helping people get unstuck that maybe you haven't shared, and then I have another question for you in wrapping up.
Okay. I would say, is there if you're feeling stuck, is there a way, and this is I'm recalling some of my I'm a writer's coach. And so when anybody's stuck in their writing and they have a roadblock, I usually say, look back, take a minute to reflect, and another time when you felt stuck. And how did you get out of that? What happened? Do some self-reflection. Did God show up in some way? What helped you get there? Because you can draw on that experience to get over that obstacle or that hurdle. Because I'm guessing you have some wiring that, you know what, actually, for me, if I'm stuck writing, I get up and I take a walk. I get outside, I move out of that space. And that is so helpful to get fresh air, perspective. Maybe I'll pop in a worship music, something to just shift
Mm.
where I am. And usually that unlocks like, oh, and I'm able to get out of that stuckness. So I would say kind of draw on something or just try something new if you're feeling stuck in your life. Like maybe you do need to take a silent retreat and plan that, or just thinking through, draw on your past and think about maybe some new things. Because again, the spiritual practices have been so fresh to me because I didn't grow up that way. That's brought a freshness and an unstuckness to my relationship with God.
Okay. You and I are the same with that. I didn't grow up with a strong sense of religion, and that's been later on in life, and through my husband and our church and that kind of thing. And so we do share in that, and I didn't realize that about you. So one more thing before I ask my last question. I just remembered you have a Bible study that accompanies this book, and I would love for you to share a little bit more. And I'll share as well, but if you could share in your words why you felt like it was important to write a Bible study to accompany this book, because this book does do a good job at the end with some things that you have available. But if you could talk to us about the Bible study.
Absolutely. I wanted to take 6 of the chapters in Starved and go much deeper and spend a week on that concept. So that felt very motivating and very fun. So we talk a week on identity, a week on shame, a week on anxiety, a week on justice, a week on forgetting all of them. But it's sweet to take a deep dive. If Starved felt a little workbooky, I really wanted us to take the time to slow down and think through each one of those scenes a little more. So it was fun to choose the 6 that I was like, oh, if I could talk more about these 6, if I could teach on them. There's 10-minute teachings to start each week that go with these that are on my website, to just travel also with communal. Like, I would love it if women would do the study together and just spend the time to see what God's word has to say. And even it's fun to, the week of rest that we talk about in the Bible study, at the end of the week that's talking about rest, they will have everything they need to practice a Sabbath if they never have before. So we build up through, what does that look like? How could I plan for this? What are some obstacles? What if I'm a single mom? So really thinking through, and just to really equip and resource people to try some new practices to find more freedom. Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, thank you for that, because it's another amazing resource that, of course, goes hand in hand with this. And so I need to check that out as well. Yes.
Yeah, thank
Okay.
you.
Yes. Okay. So my last wrap up question, I have the overarching theme of live purposefully in 2023. And when I interview people, we talk a lot about their passion for what they're doing in their hobby, in their career, in their lives. But I'm really wanting to dive a little more into purpose this season. And so I thought if you could kind of share a little more about how you are living purposefully in 2023.
Oh, that's a great question. 2 things come to mind. One, since my oldest is about to turn 16, man, it goes fast.
Mm-hmm.
We have become very purposeful about playing with our kids. And so my son picked up tennis, and my husband and I love to play it. So we are playing tennis a lot with my oldest. And just shooting 10, 15 minutes of hoops with my youngest, and kicking a soccer ball. I mean, we're an athletic family. So for us, the play just brings a lot of connection. I think I'm like, we did that when they were little. We played, but man, so purposeful in play. And I think we image God just as much as we play when we work and when we rest. Like, I think that's part of bearing his image. And then I was thinking, I already have different book ideas for the next one. And so I want
Wow.
to purposefully, yeah, I know my brain, I got, yeah. And so I want to be a woman of purpose in my writing and my teaching and in my communication. And so I really want to purposely ask God, help me to winnow down, what does he have for me next, to really solidify that next project. So, yeah.
Okay. I feel like glory to God, because already you're getting, different inspiration and different ideas. And, I think those prayers will result in you narrowing down your focus. So I can't wait to see what that turns into.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really exciting. You are just such an inspiration, and this conversation has been so life-giving and so wonderful. And I want everybody to check out your new book, Starved. It's so good.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And this conversation has been so great.
Okay, everybody, that's a wrap on this week's episode. I want to thank you for listening to the Sharing Passion and Purpose podcast. It means the world to me, and I'd love to connect with you. Please follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Sharing Passion and Purpose, and Twitter at Passion Sharing. Also, if you like this podcast, it would mean a lot to me for you to subscribe, rate, and review it. And as always, all my show notes will be available on my website, sharingpassionandpurpose.com.